Good afternoon. Welcome again. We are already 65 in this moment, but of course we will wait for a few minutes. I'm Donato Bonifazzi. Welcome to everybody. This morning the meeting was really fruitful. I think also there were a lot of new partners for EPTRI because being it an open meeting, it was not only restricted to the partners in the project, but also to the new partners that are joining now the new activities aimed for the new applications within S3 roadmap 2021 and also the InfraEA 2020 proposal. So a lot of work to be done together, and this is really a good occasion mainly for the new participants to have a wide idea on which is the work done so far, the partners involved, the activities and the results of the activities and so on. So this afternoon we will have 4 presentations because Mark Turner just told us that he cannot participate today, so he will join tomorrow. So his presentation will be moved to the end of the meeting tomorrow afternoon. And we will soon start with the first presentation. So this afternoon, we will have 4 presentations on the 4 thematic research platforms developed so far. We will start in a couple of minutes. So just, we are now 74, just waiting for some more persons to connect. Okay, so good afternoon again. I'm Donato Bonifazzi. Now, most of persons have joined the meeting, so we can start with the first presentation. It is about the thematic research platform on pediatric medicines discovery, and the speaker is Emmanuel Mikros. He is the WP leader. He's from the Greek partner Athena Research and Innovation Center. So, Emmanuel, please, the ground is yours.
Thank you very much, Donato. I hope you can hear me. I will present this pediatric medicines discovery platform this afternoon. Please, the next slide. Next slide. Okay, the target of this platform is to offer open access to academic drug discovery facilities specialized to pediatric diseases, provide integrated services, coordinating efforts among European academic centers of excellence, and hopefully through this to accelerate discovery and preclinical drug development in pediatrics. Next slide, please. The drug discovery pipeline is well known, well established, and has specific milestones, and should be the same whatever it is, adults or pediatric patients. Still, however, there are key differences, and there's unique characteristics for pediatric drug discovery. We have worked all these 2 years now, and we think that we believe that we can show that dedicated platform for pediatric drug discovery is needed. Next slide, please. Specific differences in pediatric diseases are that are multifactorial. They are not disease models adequate for taking into account the developmental status of the pediatric patients. There are emerging technologies that give the possibility for personalized medication and should be taken into account as soon as possible. And also the majority of the pediatric diseases are categorized as rare diseases. And this is a problem because are not attractive for big pharma for development of new medicines. So we believe that it is a societal need, and there is a great potential for innovation and contribution to public health to create this new platform for the drug discovery in pediatric diseases. Next slide. Next slide, please. The last 2 years, we worked together with a lot of European scientists, and discussing with them, we have identified mainly the main gaps that we were identified were related to the cellular and animal models that are needed in the drug discovery pipeline for testing new molecules and the discovery for development of new molecules to drugs. And also there is a lack of research for the mechanisms in pediatric diseases. The tests, existing tests are not validated for pediatric diseases also. And all this, next slide. All this can be, it is a good opportunity to provide all these technologies in order to develop specific pediatric drugs. You can see in this slide a fishbone presentation of the different technologies needed for the preclinical states of drug discovery. We are able to provide, as I will show you later, to provide services among the major part of them, and specifically target identification, the informatics, and cell-based and animal-based assays, while the high throughput screening and the medicinal chemistry can be provided from other existing European research infrastructure. Next slide, please. So in order the different needs that we can find within the order of in the pipeline of the drug discovery. First, we have to define a target, and the target validation is a very tedious work. It can take years, and this specific possibility for pediatric diseases and for pediatric targets is very important. The proper target selection and validation is very important for the beginning of the drug discovery pipeline. Next slide, please. Another important need is related to all the bioinformatics and in general in silico support for filtering down large libraries and giving the opportunities to be more effective and shorten the drug discovery procedure. Next slide. In this red framed, you can see needs that can be provided by other research infrastructures. Is the high throughput screening, as I said already. And in the next slide, all the medicinal chemistry part for molecules and molecular chemical libraries related to the specific search of new molecular scaffolds. Next slide. However, the most important are the cellular models specific for the disease, the targeted disease, and all the different emerging technologies like using pluripotent stem cells and 3D culture systems, as well as in the next slide, please. Advanced screening approaches using droplet microfluidics or organ-on-a-chip technologies that are very important for the efficient drug discovery procedure. Next slide. And finally, one of the most important parts is the adequate animal testing. And I'm talking about testing, not only just studying mechanisms, but testing of new molecular scaffolds and the adequate animal models are very important, and one should take into account the specific animal models for the developmental status of the pediatric diseases. Next slide. So we have planned to be able to provide services in the domain of the virtual screening, the help to design new molecular scaffolds using computers, and also the prediction of the ADME properties and the toxicity using specific models, informatic models. Next slide. Within the target validation, there is the possibility to provide services for genetic target validation using RNA interference, so silencing RNA and knockout and knockdown specific models and all the bioinformatic support. And if needed, also the target characterization, purification of proteins, and the development of some chemical probes that are related to target validation, if needed. The most important are the possibility of running tests and the screening of small molecules on specific cell models. There is the possibility for muscular dystrophies, neurological, cancer, brain injury, etc., and also development of using specific new technologies, cell-based organoids, and also, if is needed, development of specific cell lines for testing of new molecules based on patient samples. Next slide. Finally, the services that can be provided specific for testing of new molecular entities in animal models, you can see that there is a possibility of specific models, mice, Drosophila, murine, zebrafish, swine. We have the possibility to coordinate organisms, academic organisms from all over Europe, providing all these animal models. Next slide. And you can see that we are focusing specifically to the testing of the new molecular entities. There are, as you can see here in the first sentence, for cancer, for cardiovascular, for neurological disorders, for epilepsy, for different rare diseases, and also for muscular dystrophies, etc. Next slide. And finally, of course, there is a need to complete a file for the preclinical studies for the specific new molecules, the pharmacokinetic study of the new molecules, also metabolism and toxicity, and those are also services that can be provided. Next slide. In the survey that has been already mentioned this morning, within this drug discovery platform, there were 110 different research institutes that have been positively responded to contribute to the platform. Next slide. You can see that the technologies and the facilities available cover all type of state-of-the-art technologies, imaging, cellular imaging, cytometry, stem cells, bioinformatics. Next slide. The different models, mass spectrometry, NMR, etc. Next slide, and you can go further. You can skip it, it's the description. So just one slide before. The last 1 year, we also ran a feasibility study related to a specific project for drug discovery on Duchenne muscular dystrophy that began mainly after the discussion with a patient organization specific for Duchenne. Next slide, please. Duchenne is a rare but very severe genetic disease leading to inevitable death. And the existing therapies are mainly drugs from different other indications, slowing the progression of Duchenne. Next slide. There is no cure, and there is a great need, and there are not really drugs specific for Duchenne, and there is an important research activity on this specific disease. Next slide. Here you can see that in the beginning there was this group of different research centers discussing and finally plan a specific research study from Greece, Netherlands, Germany, Switzerland, Czech Republic, Italy, and also in collaboration with CVBF and the Duchenne patient organization. Next slide. The beginning was first, as I said, to define the target, and there was a discussion about the what are the possible targets. There were a lot of different ideas, and in the next slide we finally decided to target specifically these two targets, the AMPK and the SIRT1, and try to generate new molecules that are dual activators of those targets. Next slide, please. You can see here the biochemical pathway that are both targets are related, and the main idea is to create dual activators. We have run some in silico studies, preliminary studies, and also run some specific cellular studies on mitochondria, and the dual activation seems to give a better possibility for mitochondrial health. Next slide. So in the context of research infrastructure, this specific example you can understand it as following. We had a customer which was an academic group together with a patient organization, and the EPTRI could provide specific services for specific in silico screening, for, as you can see from Leiden, for specific cellular models, and from Italy, CNR, for specific also cellular assays, reporter gene assays, developed specifically for the for Duchenne and for the these targets, and also from Goethe University in Frankfurt for the target validation. And in this specific context, we had also asked for the collaboration with another research infrastructure, the EU Open Screen, for toxicity assays. Next slide. The whole project has been also submitted for funding within this European Joint Program for Rare Diseases last February. Next slide. I will finish with the SWOT analysis. We strongly believe that there is an important need, a societal need, and also a scientific gap in the drug discovery for pediatric diseases. So if there is a need, there is opportunity, but also an ethical obligation to create this platform. Fragmentation could be a weakness, but the major threat probably is funding and competition. Next slide. I can give you this example for competition. This is an IMI project, funded project, specific for cancer drug discovery. Next slide. You can see in the next slide, the purpose is accelerate drug development for children dying of cancer. This could be competition, but I believe that actually we are not competitors, but we would like to work together with all the groups that are related to pediatric drug discovery. Next slide. Here you can see the SWOT analysis. As I said, we have the science. There are very high-end facilities, state-of-the-art technologies in all over Europe. We are obliged to, ethically obliged to move in the next step and accelerate pediatric drug discovery. And with that, I would like to thank you for your attention. Next slide is the thank you.
Thanks a lot, Emmanuel, for this very, very good presentation. It's exactly 2:30. So I would suggest to go directly to the second presentation and to have any questions at the end. So we will stay still all together. Just let me check if there is some specific question for, yes, there is one for Emmanuel, so he will also be able maybe to answer right now. So this is the question from Marcello Raspa. Thank you for this excellent talk. I wonder if it is possible to define a list of mutant strains available and those to be generated ex novo. I understand the major limitation is to have juvenile models. It's for you, Emmanuel.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear. I had a.
I will repeat, no problem.
The voice was very. Can you please repeat the question? I didn't hear it at all.
I wonder if it is possible to define a list of mutant strains available and those to be generated ex novo. I understand that the major limitation is to have juvenile models.
Yes, and we can, of course. I mean, we can provide all the list that we have from the different research organisms that we are in contact, the 110. If this is the question, yes.
Thank you, Emmanuel. There is also another one. So the next one is from Sergio Giannattasio. The question is, what do you mean for a standardized cellular model? You quoted zebrafish and Drosophila models. Can humanized yeast be used as a model? Do you think that beyond genomics and proteomics, humanized
yes.
Sorry. Yes.
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
Do you think that beyond genomics and proteomics, metabolomics should also be considered? So metabolomics should also be considered. Second question.
Yeah, definitely yes. In the target validation procedure, all these kind of omic technologies are very important. I think that this is a part, however, of collaboration with the second platform related to biomarkers. So this is not only this drug discovery part, but it is important definitely for the target validation and for any kind of model. The important part is to be validated for the specific pediatric disease, and then if it is validated, of course it can be used as a model for drug discovery. And this also is one of our goals, to develop new models that can be used in pediatric disease. So I hope that I answered the question.
Okay, very well, Emmanuel. Thanks again for the very good presentation and for answering to the questions. And as you said, there is also some interconnections between different platforms. So we are going right now to the one you considered, that is the Thematic research platform on pediatric biomarkers. It will be presented by Marios Phylaktides. He's our Cypriot partner, so he's co-leader of this platform together with Marina Kleanthous in the Cyprus Institute of Genetics, and also, of course, together with Maria Luisa Lavetriano, that is not participating today to the teleconference. So, Marios, the ground is yours.
Okay, hi, hello. So the biobanking and biomarker platform aims to provide support for the identification and development of biomarkers for the purpose of facilitating drug development. It includes the provision of biosamples through the use of biobanks and also the collection of samples for specific studies. As part of these work packages, there were 5 deliverables. These are listed here. The first was the identification originally of the needs of researchers who are involved in the area of biomarker identification and development. The second was identification of the opportunities and threats to this platform. The third was a description of the research activities that will take place under this platform. The fourth was the performance of a feasibility study to test the activity of the platform. And the fifth was the preparation, the final preparation of the report on the platform, which will be included in the CDR. So deliverables 1, 2, and 3 have been already completed, and deliverables 4 and drafts for deliverables 4 and 5 have been prepared, and they will be completed shortly. Next slide, please. So in order to identify the needs of potential platform users, but also the services that could be provided by the platform, 2 questionnaires were generated and sent to organizations and laboratories for their response. The first survey was generated, was more general and was addressed both to users and service providers, and was sent out on 2 separate occasions. And it asked information regarding the fields of interest, the use of and research into biomarkers, research needs, and platform components that the responders would like to see, as well as their capabilities and willingness to become themselves providers of the platform services. Next slide, please. The second survey focused more on potential service providers, asking more information about their biobanking facilities, for example, their omics and bioinformatics activities, and experience in biomarker identification and validation. Next slide, please. So these results, the results of the surveys, have already been presented in previous meetings, so I won't spend too much time on them. But I'll highlight some of the more interesting findings. So until October 2019, about 87 respondents had replied to the questionnaire, but since then, more respondents have replied, even though these are not shown in these results. Next one, please. So the fields of interest of the respondents were quite variable, with oncology, neurology, immunology, and hematology being the top 4 fields of interest, with most participants declaring more than one field of interest. Next, please. Most of the respondents had been implicated in biomarker identification, characterization, and validation activities for biomarkers for different purposes. For example, diagnostic biomarkers, prognostic biomarkers, predictive, and safety biomarkers. Next, please. Yes, thank you. So looking at the biobanking activities of the respondents, many of the respondents appear to have dedicated pediatric sections in their biobanks, and about a smaller number of respondents had biobanks dedicated to pediatric samples. Many of their biobanks contained samples from pediatric patients of all ages, from 0 to 18 years of age, while pregnancy and postnatal samples were rather scarce in these biobanks. Next slide, please. When the participants were asked to rate areas in which they had most problems, funding and staffing issues were the most highly rated areas. However, also lack of animal facilities, having access to expertise, technologies, and instruments, as well as high quality samples, ability to adopt quality standards, and access to ethical and regulatory counseling came top of this list. Next, please. When the respondents were asked about the resources and facilities that were currently unavailable to them, most of the respondents mentioned technical resources and lab facilities, IT and biostatistics, biobanking facilities and access to samples, omics platforms, and animal facilities. Next slide, please. Looking at the services that the respondents said that they could themselves provide as part of the infrastructure, we can see that access to biosamples and biobanking services was top of the list, followed by biomarker identification, characterization, and validation activities. Other interesting services included omics technology platforms, access to accredited and certified facilities, and advice on LC issues. Next slide, please. And actually, next one. Thank you. Okay, so based on the stated needs and expertise available within the respondents of the surveys, as well as the structure of other organizations in the field of biomarker development, we propose a platform structure that looks like this, consisting of 4 major groups: the users, the pediatric hospitals and clinics, pediatric biobanks, and the distributed core facilities. Users, clinics, and distributed core facilities can work together on project design, with the clinics providing medical expertise and the distributed core facilities providing technical expertise. The clinics can also provide prospective samples for research, or these samples can be identified within the available biobanks. Collected samples can also be stored in the biobanks for use in future research studies. The distributed core facilities, based on their expertise, can carry out a host of services as part of the platform, such as omics work and data analysis, biostatistical analysis, and basic research activities. Next slide, please. So a list of the services to be provided by the Paediatric Biomarkers platform has been boils down to access to pediatric samples annotated with relevant data, access to animal biosamples for pediatric studies, omics technologies for biomarker identification, and that means proteomics, transcriptomics, and metabolomics, bioinformatics analysis of the omics data, ex vivo and in vivo experimental models for biomarker identification, and supported the qualification procedure of the biomarkers. Next slide, please. So one of the deliverables for this platform, as well for all other platforms, was the performance of a SWOT analysis, strength, weakness, opportunities, and threats analysis. This was actually carried out quite early on in the project, so some of the points that were originally raised will probably need to be revised. Some of the more important strengths include the fact that this is the first infrastructure of its size that is focusing on pediatric biomarker development. It has a wide range of expertise within the participating institutions or potentially participating institutions, and it has a minimal setup cost because of the distributed core facility organization that it has. Opportunities include the strategic role that research infrastructures play within the EU, and the fact that this platform is creating a non-profit pathway for biomarker development, which could help reduce cost and make biomarker validation financially more attractive. Weaknesses lie in the fact that this is a novel platform with an untested business model, revenue, and costing structure. Additional weaknesses might be the variability of the services offered by the different service providers making up the platform, and also the possibility of overlapping expertise with existing infrastructures. Threats may arise in the form of competition, like Emmanuel mentioned, and low levels of interest by commercial and non-commercial service users. On the threat side, we also have low levels of adoption within the EU countries, but from what has been mentioned this morning, this point is really no longer valid. Next slide, please. So finally, we performed a feasibility study to test some of the aspects of the proposed platform. And the objective of this feasibility study was the discovery and development of predictive biomarkers for the stratification of beta thalassemia pediatric patients relative to their response to the drug hydroxyurea. So hydroxyurea has received FDA approval for use in another hemoglobinopathy, sickle cell disease, but not for beta thalassemia, where patients show quite variable levels of response. So we would like to try and identify using biomarkers, predictive biomarkers, which patients respond to hydroxyurea and provide the drug only to these individuals. So completion of this project would require the involvement of EPTRI at a number of different levels. Through this platform, which was Work Package 6, it required the involvement of EPTRI-associated hospitals and clinics for the identification of participants, for the collection of samples and data, and for the performance of patient stratification based on clinical observations. Also, the use of distributed core facilities would be necessary for the omics analysis of the biological samples. We're talking about peripheral blood obtained from study participants and the collection of isolation of serum, and also the performance of bioinformatics analysis on these samples. This project also required the services of the Central Management Office, the Department for Underpinning Clinical Studies and Trials, and this is providing important connections with existing infrastructures for designing and performing clinical studies that probably need to take place at the end of the project. Also, the Central Management Office Ethical Advisory Board also provided answers to all of our bioethical questions that we had regarding this project and raised issues that we had not really considered ourselves. And finally, the Central Management Office for Patient involvement gave us a lot of advice on how to involve more patients in this study. For example, making informational films with and for the patients, and organizing discussion groups with the patients to identify risks and benefits of the study, and implicating the patients in the preparation and testing of age-appropriate information material. Next slide, please. So what we could say from this feasibility study was that what we're seeing is that EPTRI cannot really be a universal sample provider. It's impossible for any organization to promise to provide samples for every conceivable project, so that this is a limitation we need to accept. This does not mean that EPTRI can provide valuable help in sourcing samples, but not every conceivable sample can be provided. On the omics and bioinformatics, for the omics and bioinformatics services, the capacity available within the network seems to be quite good, and it was definitely a lot more than adequate for the needs of this project, of the feasibility study that we wanted to carry out. And also, we received strong and enthusiastic support from the CMO services, which was something that will be necessary for the success of this study. So that's it from me. That's the last slide. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Marios. Very good presentation indeed. As you showed, this thematic research platform is, of course, also linked to access to pediatric biosamples, and really it was also wrong because Maria Luisa Lavitiano, the work package leader, is connected. So in case there will be any question also related to biobanking aspect, she will reply. And I will just check if there are questions. Yes, there is one question for the moment. So, no, not yet, sorry. I don't see any. Maria Luisa, maybe you would like to add something to the discussion, even without question? No. Okay, so we go on, but of course, any question could be also answered later on. We will stay here at least up to 4 p.m. We can also stay longer, so no problem at all. We can go now to the following presentation, the third thematic research platform on developmental pharmacology. The speaker is Tessa van der Geest. She's our Dutch partner in the project and co-leading this platform together with Saskia De Wilt and Evelyn Jacques-Gren from Paris Diderot University in Paris, EPHP Hospital. You see also on the screen the co-authors of this presentation. So Tessa, the ground is yours.
Well, thank you, Donato, for your introduction. Yes, so this is the third thematic research platform, which is on developmental pharmacology. So you can go to the next slide, please. So you all know this this figure. So once new drug candidates have been selected, the extrapolation of adult data to establish pediatric doses, mainly aiming for optimal efficacy and safety, is limited by age-related variation in the biological processes involved in the disposition and effect. And it's not only challenging for new drugs, but also for drugs that are already on the market and for which pediatric data are often limited, including drugs with new pediatric indications. So to investigate these kind of questions, the field of developmental pharmacology plays an important role. And within the EPTRI project, we were covered by in work package 7, as you know, as one of the thematic research platform, which was integrated in this EPTRI multidisciplinary research platform with all the other thematic platforms as well, and all the other partners. So next slide, please. So EPTRI is, of course, focusing on the translational research, and these translational research steps are usually divided into 5 stages, as shown here. So classically, they are identified as T0 to T4, and EPTRI is focusing on the stimulation of pediatrics within the basic research up to the point where patients are getting involved to create a bridge between the basic research with clinical drug development in pediatrics. But of course, we all encounter some challenges. So for developmental pharmacology, we still have information gaps on developmental biology, which can be really relevant to PK and PD and ADME-related pathways, but also PD-related pathways who need some attention. So there's a need for innovative tools to support the design of the pediatric preclinical studies going up to the clinical studies. So there are some topics that are really important to mention here, which is the placental work, the modeling and simulation tools, sensitive PK and PD biomarker assays, but also pharmacovigilance approaches to think of. So next slide, please. So to address the need for translational research in pediatrics, the thematic research platforms all help to do so. So in order to facilitate the translation from the non-clinical expertise and data to clinical drug development and evaluation, to all provide the capacity to support underlying science, which is needed for clinical drug evaluation and will involve multiple experts and competences from pharmacologists, chemists, toxicologists, pharmacometricians, regulatory experts, etc. In the end, to better understand the impact of growth and maturation on pharmacology, as well as to gain specific knowledge on pediatric disease presentation and evolution, drug disposition and the response in the different pediatric age groups. So the platform of developmental pharmacology aims to help to raise awareness on innovation and advocate their use in clinical drug evaluation for the benefit of children, and will provide access to combined pediatric expertise and technology through this platform. So next slide, please. So the other speakers before me, as I expected, already told about the surveys. So multiple surveys were held, and these surveys were used to decide what services were needed, since all the thematic platforms are going to provide these services. So we needed to determine which specific services are in need for in the field of developmental pharmacology. So these services not only clarified the need for the services, but also identified the people and the centers that have the expertise in-house and who are potentially willing to provide these services within their specific field of expertise. So next slide, please. So here the identified service areas are shown, which is based on the results from these services combined with survey results from the other work packages. So here to further develop innovations like microdosing to establish in vivo pharmacokinetic profiling on new drugs is mentioned, but also placenta physiology and pharmacology to increase knowledge and accessibility to these centers that are able to do this work and to provide expertise on this, as well as to develop modeling and simulation tools like population PK/PD and PBPK models to further understanding of ADME maturation and to support first-in-child dosing recommendations are all really important topics that apparently there's a need for from the people that filled in the surveys. So in the end, we want to increase the knowledge on different maturational processes and also to use the knowledge from the toxicity, juvenile and developmental animal studies to work on that as well. And of course, all the tools need to be validated. And the last one is the sensitive analytical methods, where Evelyn has a lot of experience in, for the especially for small sample analysis. So these are the service areas that we will provide services in, and we will develop services within these areas. So next slide, please. So as part of the deliverable 7.2, we identified several partners and facilities via the surveys to enable to build a framework that can provide services. So these are the centers that are focusing on developmental pharmacology, translational discovery and validation of drug and human development, and also developmental basic science. So the methodology of their finding and selection was based on the EPTRI surveys, but additionally the expertise of the members of the EPTRI consortium, so not only our work package but also others, shared their thoughts regarding the centers on the list, as well as centers that were missing from the initial list. So people that did not respond to the survey but were known to be key experts were also approached upon later with the second round of the surveys. So this list provides information on the selected expert centers and key experts in the field of developmental pharmacology within all Europe, and they each have their specific expertise and they all showed willingness to potentially provide services if a specific request has been proposed. So this list includes a total of 39 institutions with all their leaders, and we cover 11 different European countries. So next slide, please. So of course, EPTRI needs to provide services via the platform. So we will need the facilities as shown on the previous slide. And via EPTRI, we will provide access to the specific techniques and their specific activities. However, we will not be able to provide all thinkable services during the preparatory phase of EPTRI. So we need to downsize and start with a selection of services to be provided adequately so that we can do what we promise. Thus, we will need services that are ready to run during this preparatory phase, so in a relatively short time frame. And these services will be coordinated by centers with scientific experience as well as experience in European project. And this is really also in the light of the upcoming EPTRI application, because if we get that, then we will be in a European project, and it's helpful if people have experience in that as well. So next slide, please. So the next step will be to select the specific services we are able to provide. So we can promise high quality results as we proceed in the development of EPTRI. And I think this is in the best interest of EPTRI as well. So the objectives of the so-called transnational access is to provide researchers from academia and industry access to the research infrastructure able to support studies that are underpinning optimal pediatric dose selection. So this ranges from laboratory providing access to elucidate age-related variation in, for instance, ADME, the development of physiology-based and POP-PK models, and the development of sensitive analytical assays for pharmacokinetic studies as well as microdosing studies. So next slide, please. So these are the four main topics to provide services in. And so the ADME, the modeling and simulation, small sample analysis, and microdosing. So next slide, please. So as I said, in light of the EPTRI application, we've decided to go to dedicated centers to coordinate the first services to be provided. So if a specific service request comes in, these centers will determine whether to provide this service by himself, or that they need the other potential service providers as well and contact them. So the first center is the Leuven, the Catholic University of Leuven in Belgium, and their main research goal is from the drug delivery and disposition group is to develop and apply strategies to achieve predictable, enhanced, and reproducible drug exposure. And this includes perinatal and pediatric settings. So the strength of the unit is the merged in vitro and pharmacometric expertise, and this is combined with the expertise on perinatal and pediatric clinical pharmacology. So they have a lot of experience in the pediatric field as well, which provides a lot of experience, and they know a lot of people who are working in the same field and can coordinate this quite well. They will do this in collaboration with Radboud. So Radboud has a in-house pediatric ADME group with a long-standing expertise in the field, and the combination of human ADME profiling and access to pediatric tissues and samples. So this infrastructure provides access to really pediatric-focused ADME profiling. And they have a liquid chromatography tandem mass spectrometry, so an LC-MS async chamber. They have overexpression of transporter proteins, which are pediatric specific, etc. So this group is already addressing a lot of questions relating to the ontogeny of drug metabolism and drug transport maturation in humans, in adults as well as in pediatrics. So the addressing questions relating to the disposition of new and existing investigational products is one of the field of expertise here. So these centers will closely cooperate with the selected expert centers that are familiar with doing ADME services or have a lot of experience with ADME research. So for the modeling and simulation, Radboud as well as the Assistance Publique Hospital de Paris, so APHP in Paris, will coordinate this. So Radboud has the capability for modeling and simulation of PBMPK. So they do a lot of curve fitting and pharmacokinetic analysis, physiologically based pharmacokinetic, toxicokinetic modeling, and they have a long-standing expertise in the with pediatric tissues and samples as well. And they have quite good links with other EPTRI partners who were involved, like EPTRI and BBMRI, which makes it a quite unique infrastructure in Europe for this field. And for APHP, they house the Department of the Pediatric Pharmacology and Pharmacogenetics, who develop activities aiming to analyze the impact of growth and maturation on drug disposition, including drug quantification and analysis in biological fluids and tissues. So they have a unique pediatric expertise in population PK as well as PBPK modeling, and they already offer pharmacometric services actually for many years, and have also provided guidance and support in a lot of EU projects, including TEDI, DRIP, EPTRI, and are specifically focused on the pediatric modeling and simulation. So they are a really good player to coordinate this as well. So the same hospital has a GLP certified facility with a lot of experience and expertise at medical and technical levels to develop very small volume analytical methods in biological fluids, including a UPSC MS, so an ultra performance liquid chromatography. So they have the capability of confirming and quantifying trace components in complex samples. And there are more facilities like this in Europe that have that, but the combination of facilities and the specific pediatric expertise is unique, which makes them the most ideal player to coordinate this as well. So for the microdosing, the Radboud UMC has a lot of experience, so they were involved in several microdosing and MIST studies, including the regulatory requirements, and in close collaboration with TNO and the University of Amsterdam, they have which have a very sensitive LC-MS facility and are able to produce the radionuclide samples that are needed to do these studies. So these formulations can be manufactured here. This is the only standing pediatric microdose facility in Europe offering the combined as well as the separate services. So we can provide just the formulation, but do the whole study as well. So for all 4 services, the center will coordinate it by these centers. So and they are able to provide the services. However, the other centers will also be needed, and the close collaboration will be sought with the map, that the centers on the map I showed previously. So next slide, please. So how we envision that this will work. So first of all, we will need to provide a detailed description of services to be provided within the following infrastructures. So that were the APME, modeling, simulation, so the ones that I just discussed. We don't have that yet, but we'll do that in a short time. Then we have to determine the process of access and support, the organization of transnational access service provision. So determine how to do that. So write down the process. Then we have to determine the process of how to select appropriate requests, because we can't handle all the requests. So we will need to provide a process of selection. And after we did that, we can draft and distribute a call that describes the availability of the services and the possibility to send in the requests within Europe, to let people know that the services are there and that we are able to provide them with these services. So next slide, please. So how will this then work? We will this call should be getting out of into the world to get to be known. So we will use the website of EPTRI. We can present at scientific meetings as well as the EPTRI and other partner social media outlets to publicize the services. And a call for proposal will be posted and distributed amongst the EPTRI network respondents as well as through learned societies. And we expect people to come in with requests. We will select the appropriate requests that we can handle, and we can then provide services in the topics that I discussed previously. And now next slide, please. So of course, in order to do it properly, we need to report this, and in order to learn and share experiences, we will write an annual overview of all the selected proposals, the number of users and the access units. And of all selected proposals, we will provide the scientific highlights resulting from the provided services and describe the added value of these services and the EPTRI infrastructure. So hopefully we will be successful in providing these services, and we will be able to expand the number of services and grow as a platform, and as well as being the EPTRI infrastructure. So next slide, please. So that's what I wanted to tell you today, and thank you for your attention.
Thanks a lot, Tessa. Very, very good presentation. So let's have a look on the questions in case is there any question? Just one moment. No, not yet. Any more question for the moment? Okay. Okay, so we can go to the fourth presentation, the fourth thematic research platform, the one on pediatric formulations. It will be presented by Catherine Tullow from University College of London, one of the British partners in the project. She's the leader of this thematic research platform, and there are also co-leadership from Nunzio Denora at University of Bari. So Catherine, please, the ground is yours.
Thank you very much, Donato, and good afternoon, everybody. So I would like to introduce as well my two collaborators who consecutively took part in building up this thematic research platform. This is Francis Bracco and Elisa Alessandrini, and we're from UCL. And in fact, we've worked very closely with Nunzio De Nora, University of Bari, who took on board to develop an arm on devices that will be attached to this platform, but I'm mainly going to talk about pediatric formulation today. So next slide, please. I guess I'm coming as the last presentation of today because we are kind of the last stop before compounds can be used in a clinical trial. So really, once a compound has proven interesting for a certain target and with a certain pharmacology interest, then we need to bring it closer to clinical translation, and we need to create an enabling formulation. So really, this thematic platform is to facilitate and accelerate the development of age-appropriate formulation for children. And there is various aspects of it. One, of course, is developing a new formulation of a new API, but it could be as well a better formulation of an old API. So it could be about repurposing, reformulating, so improving existing formulation. And as well, there is an element which could be only bits of this formulation development, so certain assessments, an element of quality control, and as well some regulatory input into the quality part of the pediatric investigation plan. So looking at the compounds and being able to input in various justification required by the pediatric committee in terms of quality, and one of which, for example, would be justifying the choice of excipients for the different age groups you are intending to treat. Next slide, please. So really, the idea was to join forces, bring together existing parties, but a little bit, well, differently than the other thematic platforms. There was not really existing research infrastructure as such. There are various initiatives, and for example, there is the European Pediatric Formulation Initiative, and there is other networks like the UNGAP, who has an interest on special population and children. But we don't have existing research infrastructure because mainly our main competitor, and I'm not going to go through the same structure that our work package follows, like establishing the needs, the opportunities and threats, but mainly our main competitors are the CDMO, so the contract development and manufacturing organization, who can and deliver, in fact, part of the development of a drug, and could be our threat here. And really, what we want to do is to create this community to establish the future model of pediatric formulation device. I'm not going to talk a lot about that today because it's Nunzio's baby. Thematic platform. And really the idea, as I said, is to expedite the adoption of fit for purpose technologies for better and safer dosage form for children. Next slide, please. So today I won't go through all the deliverables, but really give you a snapshot. So really, who are the partner institutions that have declared expertise in pediatric medicine formulation, delineate the resources, so the technologies and the facilities that they can bring to the table, and the service areas that we have tentatively proposed for the new platform. And again, like everybody, that was mainly from a survey that was run from Work Package 3, which was quite a general survey. So for us, it was done in 2 phases. So one that was sent out to the wider, I guess, EPTRI consortium, via the wider EPTRI consortium. But this survey was quite general. So we felt that after the first wave of answers, we had to refine the question and ask maybe for us some more specific question, because some of the description of the services that could be offered in terms of formulation were very general, like I can make a tablet. But in fact, and some others were very specialized. So we kind of struggled to be able to group the different service provider in something that made sense to build the platform. So we had a second wave where we looked as well at, in the literature, from institutions that have done some work in around pediatric formulation and devices and were not in our pool of partner institutions that declared interest. So we ended up having, next slide, please. Oh, sorry. So, okay, that's okay. So first, we started with the user needs, and what people wanted were more specialized service to enable development of age-appropriate formulation. So from being able from compounds to create a patient-centric formulation and a formulation that is regulatory fit for purpose. And or services that could provide, for example, acceptability, so swallowability or palatability assessment that could be done in vitro and or in vivo, but all that, yeah, pre-clinical type of services. People wanted to be able to access services towards appropriate delivery systems and devices for new API and or to improve existing formulation of API. Next slide, please. So that's what we got from the survey. So a wide distribution across Europe of 33 partner institutions. I'm not to go around the various countries. It's a little bit skewed, which I believe represents, you know, where the expertise is, but it's skewed towards who sent the survey to whom. So as you can see, there is lots of UK institution. It's probably because, you know, lots of my network was in the net that was sent. But anyway, we've got a wide distribution in Europe, and most of those institutions are universities, as you can see, with public funding. Next slide, please. So that's giving you an idea, and we tried again to break that down a bit further to be able to map a bit better what those facilities could deliver. So most of the partner institution could deliver formulation of conventional small APIs, and however, we still have some institutions that can do biologics, as you can see, and a wide range of type of oral formulation for a wide range of routes of administration, ranging, yeah, from oral to parenteral routes of administration. Next slide, please. And that's kind of, at the other end of the spectrum, the various service areas that were defined in terms of pediatric formulation. So there was, and I'm going to try to give you examples along the formulation. Yeah, this one, thank you. There is advisory services, as I explained before, in terms of all the consideration that needs to be made and the justification that are required when it comes to possibly later on in the life cycle of the product, but towards the PEEP. An important aspect is the pre-formulation assessment, which really defines what you can do in terms of formulation. And of course, there is the formulation level, which is formulation for oral, non-oral routes of administration. And we've tried to group them like that. An element that is maybe a bit more specific for pediatric formulation, especially the oral one, is the patient experience type of assessment. So if we need to require to test masking technology, how are you going to measure that? Of course, then there is formulation for biologics, formulation for drugs that needs a modified release, Then there is all the performance assessment, whether they're regulatory binding or not. And we looked as well at partners that could provide GMP assessment, but then we are moving into the field of companies who are doing this kind of stuff, and possibly less so universities, for example. Then there is the scaling up, process development and validation that is often required as an important step from something that you do at bench scale, lab scale, then moving into commercialization. And something on what we call product presentation, so including administration devices. And this is where the discussion started on, you know, how can we integrate devices into this platform, because it seems naturally linked to the formulation, but it's in itself such an important and large topic that it was decided to develop like a parallel platform for it. Next slide, please. So, for example, in terms of advisory services, what can be provided is looking at feasibility of various formulations. So for the person requesting the question, you know, what can they do with their compounds, including timeline and costs. Then looking into various formulation options to deliver the best, the most appropriate drug delivery technology. Then there is looking into innovation as well, so on top of the traditional formulation strategies. And of course, as I said, regulatory advice, so towards the quality section of the PIP. Next slide, please. In terms of performance assessment, I guess some of them could be, there is lots of ad hoc tests that some labs have generated or are using, but as well there is all the other ones that are more regulatory proficient. So, for example, some lab in vitro could provide a whole set of pharmacopoeial tests that are necessary to show the performance of your drug dosage forms, and that goes towards, you know, drug stability tests so from, you know, the really like the dosage form characterization to stability assessments. And then in vivo, there could be, they are preclinical because they're not part of clinical trial, but some human-based studies such as acceptability, organoleptic tests to assess dosage forms acceptability, for example. Next slide, please. And that's kind of how we tried to group the various technology that can be offered over the 33 partner institution. So there is an element of drug or product characterization that can be done in vitro, ranging from taste assessment, so completely in vitro like the tongue, or you know, via animal measurements such as the brief access taste aversion model, measurement of formulation effective concentration in terms of safety, cytotoxicity and excipient toxicity that can be done as well, and of course stability measurement, microbiology and institution with ICH capabilities to do stability studies. But there is an element, and again, that could be at the frontier with other thematic platform, and that's where a one-point access, you know, could be very valid in terms of choosing the best partner to deliver the services. But of course, some formulation is at the interface of the chemistry and the in vivo behavior. So animal-based assays are required. You know, so some institution can deliver PK, bioavailability, bioequivalence studies. There is some, as I explained before, human-based assay that can be delivered. And linked down to methodological development for clinical trials, assessment of acceptability of formulation in patient, for example. Next slide, please. And in terms of, that probably should have been presented before, but in terms of pre-formulation capabilities, this is something that is very important as the first step towards moving to a formulated product. So from drug substance characterization, solubility assessment, enhancement, and accelerated stability studies, excipient safety, permeability studies, compatibility studies, and classification of your compounds if not known. Next slide, please. Then the various technology that were scoped through the survey were, for example, on test masking technologies, more specifically, so institution with all those various type of technology at hand, so from coating to flavoring to micro encapsulation to hot melt extrusion, etc. And similarly, you know, we managed to scope a few modified release technologies that could be delivered by some institution. Next slide, please. And then if we move towards more advanced, I would say, or specialized technology, as well, there was some institution that declared some targeted drug delivery technology or nanotechnology that they could deliver. Next slide, please. So really to summarize, that's a repeat of one of the drug that was presented earlier on. That's the various service areas that have been defined so far. They might need to be refined, regrouped, or homogenized, I guess, for the next step of the project. And I've put in blue, of course, the added parts on devices, the medical devices. Next slide, please. So to summarize, we've got many partner institutions that have declared related services that they can deliver for the pediatric formulation and device platform. We have been able to scope various activity, and they've been grouped by service areas. And that's going to help really, you know, to refine in the next step, you know, how we're going to describe them, how we're going to link it, you know, they're going to be accessible, and how they're going to be linked to the requests that will be made in the future. So really, this platform serves as a matching tool from the provider and the person, the group requesting some specific services. And all that is really to enable a timely and efficient formulation of suitable pediatric medicines. And I think that's it. So next slide. Yeah, I think that's it. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Catherine. Thanks a lot. We have time for some questions. There was already one from Giovanni, but it was for Tessa. It was very simple. I'm sorry, looking for it. It was on the screen. Oh yes. How do you envisage future collaboration? So it's for everybody, we can see, between different thematic research platforms. So we have seen that all of them are interconnected. Maybe someone more, someone less, but according to specific needs, sure we'll need to work together. How do you see this in the future?
Is that I think that's a bit what was described this morning as all requests, you know, as they would come to the central hub, then they're going to trickle down through a governing body, you know, boards and an executive board. So I guess in terms of the, I would expect that there would be enough leadership in these boards to then spot, you know, the overlap or the synergy or the antagonism of the various needs for the various platforms.
Yes,
I think
Catherine.
Yeah.
Also, Tessa, Marius, Emmanuel, anybody who would like to add something to this discussion? Of course, they are all allowed to intervene.
Yes, this is Tessa. I agree with Catherine, and I think, well, besides the overlapping the CMO, the organizations, it's also important that the thematic research platforms are keeping in touch with each other, so that at least we know which services are done, what we plan to provide for new services, for instance, and to identify the more or less gray areas in terms of services or topics that we work with in the platform that maybe touches upon work that has been done in other platforms, and in these gray areas we need to collaborate, definitely.
Thank you, Tessa. So for sure, this will be addressed within a governing board where the thematic research platforms will be participating in order to share these responsibilities and the common way of manage organization and services, and also to the access management structure. As you said, also the central management office and the single access point will be some level of the organization that for sure need to be shared between platforms. Maybe there is also Emmanuel or Marius that would like to add something.
Yes, I think that I have already mentioned it in my presentation that at least from our point of view in the platform for drug discovery, we have a lot of activities that are interrelated to the biomarkers and all the omics technologies, and also the animal models with pharmacokinetics, etc., and metabolism with the platform for developmental pharmacology. Clearly a lot of common areas. So there are a lot of joint activities that are important to be performed together.
Okay, great. So as soon as the conceptual design report draft will be ready, for sure your contribution in addressing this kind of relationships between different research thematic platforms would be very, very relevant. I have another question, another topic suggested from Mariangela to all of you again. So how do you envision the patient's engagement in the activities of your platform?
If I can say, in our case, it was almost obvious because we had the feasibility study that began from the patient organization. Practically, it was the initiation came from the patient organization, the need for specific drugs for the specific disease. So I cannot imagine any better example than this one.
I guess for formulation, it's probably a bit easier. Like if you've got, for example, to make a decision in between three, the choice in between three different type of dosage form, they can certainly, be engaged and and surveyed or involved.
Yes, sure. Thanks a lot.
For biomarkers, given that the like sampling and the collection of samples is a very important part in the biomarker identification and development process. Having patients who are willing to participate in projects and studies is really very important. So the best way to ensure this agreement of the patients to take part in studies is to involve them in the study from as early on as possible and have them as one of the collaborators, really, rather than just test subjects that provide the samples. So the more engagement from early on, the better would be for us. And some of the suggestions that we got from the CMO, we hadn't really, we don't normally have such high level of patient engagement normally in our projects, but it would be something that would be very useful, and especially in such a vulnerable group of patients and their parents, getting them implicated from the start and identifying, like working with them on, for example, risks and benefits for them would help a long way towards ensuring their agreement to take part in the projects, and they would see them not just as like being used, but they're also like that they are consulted and their needs are taken into account. So for this platform, it's really important.
Okay, thanks to everybody. I would like also to remind that patients have been at the center of the project since the beginning, and several patient associations are supporting the project, like Eurordis, but also many others, and also that activities with patients have been also performed, involving young patient advisory groups, as you will very well see tomorrow with the dedicated presentation, so I will not anticipate anything else, but also in the further projects in the INFRA and in the S3 application, in the stakeholders roundtable. So all the future initiatives will have always patients involved in the project, in the activities and the planning of the activities. I would like to pose you another question. It is about the feasibility studies. All of you were also involved or proposed or evaluated some feasibility studies. We received 11 proposal of feasibility studies so far, starting from June last year, when a call for proposal was issued, and it is still open on the website in order to collect more proposals. They were a very useful way to understand which could be the way of working of the EPTRI and of each thematic research platform in the future. So the question is, if thanks to the feasibility studies, did you better manage to understand how to organize, or some new consideration arose, and how they helped you in defining future activities?
If I can bring something relatively new in this discussion, is my difficulty in the feasibility study was how to attract the interest of the industry, the pharma industry, and I think that this is very important in the EPTRI activities in general, and for the sustainability. I think that the possibility to attract contracts from industrial partners is very important. I'm still coping, and I'm not sure how to, because the majority of the pediatric diseases are rare diseases. It's difficult to run clinical studies, etc., etc. So this is something to be considered in general, I think.
Yeah, thank you, Emmanuel. So specific actions has to be carried on to involve companies in the future activities and the future projects, because as you know, in the InfraDev one was not planning to perform specific activities, even if there was a very good user survey, you know, performed by Liverpool University. Mark will tell something, Mark Turner, about it tomorrow, and 337 potential users of EPTRI answered to the survey. They were mostly academic institutions, but there were also a lot of commercial organizations, and really there were a lot of interesting issues where companies declared interest in looking to EPTRI development. So when in the following phases it will be more mature to start liaising with the companies and also proposing services to be provided, for sure there will be an interesting market in this direction. Any other comment related to feasibility studies? Or any other question?
I think for me, because some of the services can be quite generic, and certainly many institutions, you know, can do many of them. It would be, you know, how are we going to do the triage? You know what? And who are we going to send the request to if there is like 5 institutions that can do the same thing? What are going to be the criteria? And I think we haven't got that.
Sorry, Katri, we didn't hear you very, very well. If you could repeat, please. And,
it would be, you know, how are we going to select the service provider if there is, let's say, 5 that can deliver the same service?
Okay, this is a very clear question. So the process will start through the single access point. The request will be managed and directed to the 3 different areas of services, so centralized, common, or integrated. So I suppose we are speaking about integrated services. So it will be defined which is the platform to be involved, or if more than one, but probably one. And when this will be defined, there will be a final decision that will be performed by the governing body we were discussing before, which will involve, of course, the platform leader. So it will be a decision between the coordination team and the platform leaders to understand with some specific procedures and using some defined agreements to define the best way to protect intellectual property right, to define fees and so on. yes, it will be signed a contract with the user, but the selection, that is what you were saying, will be based on 3 criteria that were also described by Duccio this morning. So a technology excellence criteria, a market access criteria, in order to look for the best one to provide the specific service. In case there are more than one available at the same condition, there will be issued some kind of call asking for 2 different providers to propose their services, and in that case it will be the best quality ratio proposal that will be the winner.
Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. So probably there is yes, another question. No, not a question. Adriana would like to add something. So please, Adriana.
Yes, just on this issue, 2 questions. One is regarding mainly the question from Emmanuel, that of course our feasibility studies are similar, but not the same of what will happen in the future, because in the future the EPTRI will receive specific service request, while each feasibility study is an ensemble of many different research activity need and many services. So it has been more complex to elaborate this kind of request. The second point related to the question of Catherine, but of course your answer has been enough clear. I just would like to underline one point. EPTRI is a research infrastructure very different from all other we know, also in EPTRI roadmap, because it is a real distributed research infrastructure in which the specificity is that the same research unit, the same participant can act as service provider and service user. What is very interesting is the critical mass of scientists, competence, experience that should remain into the single platform or collaborating in more than platform according to their capacity to provide science. Different is what we mean provide service, and is exactly the role that in the EPTRI design has been assigned to thematic research platform leader. The lead of the platform should help in identify which kind of contribution each single research unit is not only able, but is of our interest that will provide. So some research units are more close to the, we can say more close to the market, to the activities of interest for industry, etc. Other research units are very relevant because they are able to provide science, to provide basic research, maybe not service. You, together with us, have the role to identify this different capacity and to better guide the selection and of the user, the provider, and the kind of service that we are to link all together.
Okay, thank you, Adriana. I also allowed all the other speakers in the morning, from Angela, Duccio, and Giovanni, to participate to the discussion. So everybody can add anything else he wants or she wants, and and also if is there any other question from the participants, they can still write on the desk.
Donato, can I say something in this? This is Giovanni. Again, nice to hear all of you. I have previous experience, as you know, about the relationship of a research infrastructure with the market. And my opinion, to be frank, is that whenever there is a market that is easy or profitable, you will find private enterprises dealing with it. So whatever there is a service, you will find a company that is providing that service. The only limitation that you have in the relationship with a, let's say, for-profit situation is when you have either high expertise that are not available around or machinery that is unique. That two conditions take precedence, meaning that the industry will come to the academic unit, research unit that have this kind of qualities, if you want. Otherwise, they will go for commercial enterprise. So we need to nurture these two characteristics in the research unit. Also because providing service, it's not something that you improvise. You need to have the support of the administration. They need to be fast. They need to understand the mechanism of writing a contract with the industry. They don't have to, let's say, be too much legalistic in the point of view that they delay the business for, let's say, 6 months just for discussion. That is not acceptable for an industry where months means money. And this is one point. The other point is, if we want really to have an impact, we need to increase the amount of research, basic research, that is translated. This means finding resources to do basic science, which means finding the ideas, selecting the best, finding consortium, prepare request of funding, and act on this. And this is an activity that takes time, need a lot of support. And by the way, there is private company that do this all the time, helping academics to write proposal for the commission, for the national entities, and so on. So we will have competition. We need really to sit down and focus. And I think that the preparatory phase, it's what we have to use for this. Get out and get ready.
Thanks a lot, Giovanni. I would like to say that the EPTRI project will terminate very soon, but we will still continue all the activities. So this is very important. You said that the first step is receiving ideas from the basic to be translated, and I would like to say that on the EPTRI website is always available the link to submit feasibility studies. So it is something no more related to the project and not yet related to future activities, but it is essential to bring together this pediatric research community and to describe, propose ideas and way to link different resources. This is very relevant. And the other thing you suggested, Giovanni, is also very, very important. So to start applying for requests for funding, because this will be a very good way to start working on pediatric research projects, activity, medicine development plans. And we will do this starting from the feasibility studies proposed, looking for available call for proposals and trying to submit proposals. Any other comment? Okay, there is a question from John Van Dale. The question is, just to say that I believe in an ecosystem between academia, small and medium enterprise, and industry. He is talking as a CEO of a SME in Belgium. The name of the company is not relevant for the moment because it was just interesting to know that we have also participants. It is an open meeting from the private sector, and he wrote that is one of those interested in liaising together academia, small and big industry.
Yes, this is Mariangela. Just to support what Joan said, we will try to put all our efforts, especially in the next phase, in the preparation phase with the INFRAIA, and we will we will focus several activities on the outreach and networking, and we will foresee and develop a lot of activities dedicated to the different targets. So we will address the industry, the patient association, the scientific community. We started in EPTRI with more than 20 partners. Now, so far, we have more than 300 organizations that have been mapped, that have been expressed their willingness to be included in EPTRI. In the next step of EPTRI, in the preparation, we will involve several other partners that were not previously involved in the first consortium. So this means that this is a proof for us that we are going in a good direction, that we have proof that there is interest in our activities, and we have tried in these 2 years and a half to design the services in a way that are really aim to meet the needs of the user community, but also the scientific community. So we have, as it has been already said, we have launched a survey to identify which are the expectations from the users, which are the needs that they would like to pay for. And so we think that the next phase of EPTRI, in which we are going on, will be a way to put all the lessons learned in these 2 years and a half in order to move forward. And now we are more than 300. We are going to establish also the legal framework in order to go on, because we are signing the memorandum of understanding. So this is everything that will really allow us to start to be established as a research infrastructure and not only as a project.
Thank you, Mariangela. Any other comments, questions? No. Final remarks from some of the speakers this afternoon? No? Okay, so thanks to everybody. It was really a very interesting meeting, very well participated from a lot of persons. There is still a final comment that it's interesting public-private partnership, because also for getting grants, participation of small and medium enterprises is a netted value. This is true. Thank you again. And so thanks to everybody. You will receive again tomorrow morning at 9 the reminder for the next session tomorrow morning starting at 10. It will be really interesting for us, because there will be during all the morning for 3 hours, 13 different presentations from 13 different authors, despite the fact that some of them proposed more than one abstract, but of course we preferred to select not more than one from each. They will be 13 very interesting abstracts that could also lead to feasibility study, to new activities. Most of them are from external researcher to EPTRI, but there are also some very well-known colleagues of us already involved in the project. So it will be also interesting looking at different point of view from, let's say, internal and external researcher to EPTRI. And so I hope all of you will participate tomorrow morning, and thanks again. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
See you tomorrow.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Well, see you tomorrow morning.